Okay, just so you're all aware, I am recording today's sprint demo, and I'll be posting it on the Dev Exchange YouTube channel, which is visible to the public. If you have any concerns, please let me know, and I can address them at that point. The link to that YouTube channel for the Dev Exchange is also in my meeting invite. So if you need to find it, otherwise you can just go to YouTube and Google Dev Exchange, and there's a playlist there where a whole bunch of different teams put on their sprint demo recordings. So ours is in there as well, the last few sprints. I'd also like to acknowledge that most of us in the Victoria area are conducting most of our government business and live on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, today known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and also from the traditional territories of the Wasanich peoples. I also want to acknowledge that some of us on this call may not be joining us from Victoria, may be joining us from other traditional territories. Present here today are myself, Mars Romer, as the Scrum Master for this team, and our alternate product owner, Katie, is here while our product owner, Elizabeth, is away. Our development team consists of Dave Shively, Michael Stevens, Natalie Russell, and Katie Sloan also plays a developer role on this team. And we are actually one person short this week, which is Sarah Blake. She, as some of you may know, that she has taken a job at a new ministry or another ministry, and we miss her already, and we're going to miss her, continue to miss her for the rest of this project. But we wish her the best in whatever she is doing there. Our team is working on a handbook that people can use to develop org schedules in the BC government. Today is our sprint review day. It's an informal working meeting between the Scrum team and the key stakeholders. It is held at the end of our 3-week sprint, during which we are developing the next iteration of the Developers Handbook. The purpose of the meeting is to demonstrate the latest work that we have done on the product, and to give our key stakeholders an update on our progress, as well as collect any initial feedback from them. This feedback will be useful to us in prioritizing and planning future work for the product. And this will not be the only opportunity for the stakeholders to provide feedback. You can contact us at any time, send us feedback by email, or we can just have a phone call later on. Please reach out to our product owners, Katie and Elizabeth, if you need to. And without further ado, I think I will turn it over to Katie to do the demo.
Yeah, thanks, Mars. So before I begin, I would also just like to acknowledge that I'm speaking today from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, on whose land I work, live, and play. And I just ask that you also reflect on the traditional territories where you might be situated today. So just, yeah, kind of like what Mars has already done, I thought I'd just give a little update about what's happened with this sprint. As Mars mentioned, very sadly, we lost a team member, Sarah Blake. She accepted a position with the Ministry of Public Safety and the Solicitor General. And while we're very happy for this exciting new opportunity for her, we're very sad on our behalf because Sarah was a very enthusiastic and positive person who had a real can-do attitude. So we will greatly miss that, and just wanted to say thank you to Sarah for all her hard work on the handbook so far. And also, I just would like to give a shout out to Sarah Shea, who is covering for Elizabeth right now, who's on vacation. Sarah Shea stepped in as acting product owner in this sprint, and she is, like myself and Natalie and Dave, she's an archivist in GRS, and her insights and expertise were really appreciated this sprint, and I felt really added to the value of the handbook. So I just want to say thank you very much, Sarah, for stepping in and, yeah, acting product owner in Elizabeth's absence.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, so now on to what the team was up to these last 3 weeks. So the last 4 sprints were really focused on determining client readiness for embarking on an ORCS project and ensuring that everything that was needed to start a project, such as determining whether the client was ready or establishing a project charter, were in place. So the last 4 sprints were really focused on that. But this sprint, we kind of switched gears and started focusing on starting an actual ORCS project itself and what an ORCS project looks like. So this sprint looks specifically at the beginning phases of beginning an ORCS project, specifically looking at how to kind of do some background research and analysis to help a developer situate themselves and to better understand the purpose and context of the program area that they're developing the ORCS for. So this information we included in the handbook because it will help the developer to understand why a program area creates and manages the records that they do. And it's intended to help the developer to group and classify records to help them better understand and to be able to best group and classify records when they're writing an ORCS schedule. So I just want to stress here that the amount of background research and analysis needed really depends on the scope and size of a project. So a small amendment, for example, to one secondary in an approved ORCS, it probably won't need the amount of research and analysis that is required when you're starting an ORCS project from scratch or you're doing a formal amendment to a whole ORCS. As a result, some of the information that is included in this sprint, it may not be relevant or apply to a project that you might be working on. It's really up to the developer to determine what information is helpful to them. We just assumed that the ORCS developer was starting from 0, and we tried to include as much information about doing background research and analysis as possible, just so that the research or the developer has that information if they need it. But we always kind of want to give too much information as opposed to not enough information, so the developer can really pick and choose what information is relevant to them. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what we were working on this sprint. So just give me 2 seconds. All right, can you see my screen? Okay, see Mars
Yes.
is nodding. So I will just jump on in. So yeah, in this sprint, we introduce the concepts of functional analysis and context of records. Functional analysis is the standard that is established by the Government Records Services, GRS, which I'm part of. And the functional analysis is the standard in which GRS developers, including myself, follow when we're developing an ORCS. We follow this standard as functions and activities of a program area are more stable over the long term than trying to classify records based on workflows or record types. We really try to create schedules that won't need a lot of amendments over time and that are stable over time, because it can take a long time to amend a record or amend a record schedule. So we try to, so that's why we use functional analysis when drafting and writing our ORCS. So in this sprint, we've included a high-level overview of what functional analysis is and why it's important when developing and drafting ORCS. As you can see, we started this section with a definition of what functional analysis is and some of the important definitions associated with it. There's a lot of stuff here, so I'm not going to read through it, but you can see we have the definition of functional analysis here, and then we have a few more definitions regarding or related to functions, activities, and records, and how they relate to functional analysis. We also included a section giving more information about functional analysis and how to use it in order to better understand what functions and activities a program area carries out, as well as some questions that the developer should look at to better understand the purpose and functions of the program area that they're writing the orgs for. So this just gives a little more information here about function-based systems and why they're important. This section here, understanding the function and activities of the program area, gives a little bit of more information about just functional analysis, and looks at some questions that the developer should look at when they're considering drafting their orgs. So I'll let you read that on your own time. So next, we've included a brief introduction about how to write in orgs using functional analysis, giving a brief description of how this standard is used in GRS. And it also gives a brief overview of the org standard and structure, which you can see over these next 2 pages. So we give a little blurb about functional analysis within the government of British Columbia and how we use it. It gives a little information about the org standard and what an orgs looks like. So it gives information about how we group, in an orgs, we group functions. Functions are grouped, or functions, sorry, let me try that again. Primaries represent functions within an org schedule, and secondaries represent activities in an orgs. Gives a little bit of information there. And then we give a little bit of a breakdown of what the org structure looks like within how it looks like in the government of British Columbia, how we write function-based orgs. So it gives a little bit of information as well as an example. If you go to the orgs e-library, you can pull up this barrister and solicitor orgs and kind of take a look at it and see how it's broken down into primaries or functions and secondaries or activities. So I'll let you read that on your own time. Next, we created a section on background research that can assist the developer in doing functional analysis and how to gather more information about the program area and their records that the developer is drafting a schedule for. We have a write-up on understanding the context of records, which is key when you're trying to classify records. Context tells the story of an organization, and it illustrates the past and current activities that necessitated the creation of the records, as well as demonstrates relationships between records, how they are used with each other, and how some records support other activities. So understanding the activities performed within a program area will help developers classify their records in the long term. So in this section, we give a little explanation about why context is important. And then we provide a list of sources that you should, or the developer should kind of consult to kind of get a better understanding of the context of the records that they're trying to classify. So these include things like the internet site, the public facing sites. This tends to give a high-level overview of the program and highlights policies, programs, and commitments. Gives kind of an overview of what the program area is and what their mandate and what their purpose is. So these are really helpful when you want to get kind of a little more background information about what the program area is and what they do. You can also consult an intranet site. So these tend to have policies and other materials that aren't available to the public, but are still very helpful to the program area and gives you a better sense. These tend to be more detailed policies that you need to know when you're drafting in orgs. Oops, sorry. My mouse is a little excited. So other things that might be useful when getting to know some background information about the program area and kind of about what kind of records they create and manage are things like service plans, strategic plans, and annual reports. Things like legislation, mandate letters, and policy statements. And also talking to people in the program area itself. People who work in the program area, they know their records best. So they're usually the best people, best sources of information to talk to, because they'll be able to tell you all about the records and how they manage them and why they're important. And then we also added just other program records, other kind of things you can look at that may be helpful to kind of situate the developer or help the developer situate themselves and learn more about the program area and some of the records that they'll be classifying. So things such as PIAs, manuals describing operational systems, job profiles, etc. And then we also included some GRS resources just to kind of also help the developer understand, kind of get more background information and see how maybe the records are currently being managed or what's happened in the past, because that can help the developer write the schedule going forwards. So we have some things like looking at current or draft orgs. One question I know that I do when I go into a program area is I try to determine whether there's a current copy of an orgs or if there's been any drafts made in the past. Yeah, it will just help you be a good launching pad for starting a development project, especially when the developer meets with the subject matter experts. They can discuss what currently works in the orgs, what doesn't work in the orgs, what sections should be updated or revised, what kind of records are missing, etc. So it just gives a little list of where you can find to see if there's any current or draft orgs floating around. Another really important report that developers use to kind of situate themselves and just kind of learn more about the records that are currently being managed in a program area is the All Status Report. The All Status Report gives a really detailed listing of the records that the program area creates and manages over the course of doing business. And it can assist developers by kind of it lists the volume of records that may be impacted by an orgs project. It provides terminology used by the program area when they send records off-site. This will be helpful when you're writing in orgs because you want to use language that the program area is familiar with. It will also describe if the program area has any ongoing or one-time schedules that will be impacted when you write the orgs. The All Status Report lists whether the records, if any records that had been off-cited were placed on hold or returned to the client. This usually means that there's a reason why it has been returned. Usually it's because it's been misclassified under an ARCS, or maybe there's some questions about the records. So that's a good place to kind of look into and follow up on. The All Status Reports looks at ARCS classifications that the program area uses, and it also gives information if people are off-citing records under the O1 General Secondary. If a program area is sending a lot of records under this general secondary, that usually means that they're missing there's a gap in the orgs. These records aren't being captured, or the function or activity isn't being captured in the orgs. So that usually means there's a gap, and that needs to also be investigated. Yeah, So I would also just want to give a shout out to Michael Stevens. He wrote a very detailed guide about what the all status report looks like. And he wrote a little cheat sheet about what each column in the report represents and why they're important. I won't read through them because it's very long, but these can be really helpful for developers who want to know more information about the all status reports, or they're not quite sure what some of these columns are, why they're important, or what they mean. So big thanks to Michael for drafting that. And finally, another really helpful report that a developer might want when they're starting their background research and analysis is the Indented Org Chart, which is generated by Eris, which is a system that GRS uses. It's helpful because it kind of shows, it has a similar structure to a ministry organization chart, but it has a different purpose. It's typically used to determine which organizational units currently or have historically stored records off-site, and how the custody of records have changed over time. So that kind of gives you a better sense of the history of who had these records and how they've moved across government across time. So that can also be helpful when developers are thinking about drafting their orgs. So again, Michael also wrote a beautiful detailed report about the Indented Org Chart, what it is, and what the different columns are in the org chart and what they mean. So if a developer asked for these reports and they're not quite sure what they mean or what they represent, they can look at this report and get a better sense about what the reports are and what the different columns mean. Yeah, so I've been talking quite a bit, and I know this is a lot of information to throw at you, and it's a lot of information to, sorry, I'll just wrap up. I'll just say I'm almost done, and it's a lot of information to throw at you. So I'm going to turn it over to you all if you have questions.
I think there's a question from Linda.
Good morning. Katie, thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate the part on functional analysis. I know there's a lot of struggle, and I've found myself explaining that a lot, so it's nice to have it all synthesized in one spot. Something I'm wondering, just a suggestion, whether we want to add that, it mentions that functional analysis and classification schemas is a standard in the BC government, and I wonder if it would be useful to also note that it's actually an international standard, that there's an ISO in regards to that. So it might help to contextualize that and give people a wider understanding about RM standards in government, that it is reflective of international standards and practice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely, we can bring that back to the group and see what they think.
We'll take a little pause while everyone is letting all of that information sink in from the demo. And if you have questions or comments, we are certainly here to take them. So a second for it to formalize those questions in your head.
Yeah, I do apologize. This is a very kind of technical, sprint with a lot of information that's a bit hard to digest. So I do understand if maybe you're looking at this and you're like, I'm not quite sure. So if you wanted to take some time, definitely take the time to read through it. And you can either send your questions or feedback to myself or to Mars or Elizabeth. She is back tomorrow, so we'd be happy to take your questions and feedback then.
Hi, Katie. I just want to
Okay.
say that all of this is going to be very helpful for the new archivists, that we have 2 new archivists starting on Monday, and this will be, very helpful primer for them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, a lot of this information will really depend on the developer and their background knowledge and experience. So some of this information might be way too much and way too detailed, and they may not need it. We're just assuming that the developer who is reading this handbook is coming in cold and just doesn't know, or needs, maybe they've been away from the records management world for a while and they just need a really good refresher. So that's kind of where we're coming from. But we do understand that this information is really kind of a pick and choose what is the most relevant to them.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Last chance for questions, comments.
Again, I just want to say a big shout out to Michael, who went through each line, especially if the all status report. It's a big kind of intimidating looking report. So it's so nice that Michael kind of went through and broke everything down and gave a brief overview of what each column means and represents. So thank you very much, Michael.
And this handbook is now live also at the GRS training site. So you can take a look at this later on your own time. All this information that Katie showed is there now. So feel free to take a look in your own time as well, and definitely get back to us with your feedback. It's what actually drives us to make this better and better. Okay, I think at this point I can give you back half hour of your day if there's nothing else. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate this. And like I said before, please send us your feedback. We might even start reaching out to stakeholders individually to get that feedback. So you should probably expect to hear from us. But once again, thank you so much for attending. See you at the next sprint demo in 3 weeks.
Thanks for the overview.
Thank you,
Lots of great
everyone.
work done this round. Thank you.